of the Camino. Glad you guys are here, and we hope that some will be able to join us online also, and we're recording this. So, Mac, be on your best behavior, okay? Try to, we're in Christian community right now. Let's have fun. And so excited to welcome Suzanne Gorhow and Joyce Serenel for the Camino, some more in-depth pictures and stories. So you can, maybe they'll let us pepper them with questions too. So really looking forward to this. And then just a little note, the Sudanese have their worship this afternoon, but they're okay. So we take our time here, and then I'll work with them, and we just work really well together. How about if I open this with prayer?
That'd be wonderful.
Okay. Dear God, thanks for our walk with you every single day. Thank you for how you walk with us. Please use this special time for us to be present with you and to be open and to learn more about how we are with you in no matter what, that we are there in your presence and that you love us and have light and wonder for us in everything. So bless this special time and bless Suzanne and Joyce especially. We pray this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. So we're going to start with just a little bit of history of the Camino. The Camino de Santiago is known, it's the way of St. James. So you remember St. James. St. James was the brother of John, the sons of Zebedee. He was one of the apostles. And the story goes, the Apostle James went to Spain when they were all divvying up where they were going to go. And so he went to Spain to evangelize, to share the gospel. And then he came back to Jerusalem. When he came back to Jerusalem, he was beheaded in 44 CE by Herod Agrippa I. And then the story is that his disciples took his body in a stone boat, and the angels brought it back to Spain. And his body was buried by the Queen of Spain at the time, Queen Lupa, and then it was forgotten. And then in the year 841, a hermit named Pelagius had a vision of a field of stars, and that led him to the tomb. And he told his bishop about it, and the bishop said, well, that is St. James. And so they built a cathedral, which is in Santiago de Compostela. Compostela means field of stars. So it goes back to this vision by this hermit. And I think, whoops, not there yet. So pilgrims started coming to this. And so they've been walking it for over 1,200 years. In the Middle Ages is when the most pilgrims were coming, and so they built infrastructure. They had places for the pilgrims to stay. They had bridges for the pilgrims to get to the various places. And they had, you might have heard of the Knights Templar. They were this group that was supposed to protect all these pilgrims who were coming to Santiago. And then interest in the pilgrimage started to wane over the next couple hundred years. And then, in the 1980s, a Catholic priest named Father Elias Velina revived the Camino. He was the parish priest at the town of Ocebrero, which is one of the places that Joyce and I stayed. And so he went out, and along this route, he was painting yellow arrows so that people would know the way that they were supposed to go. So there are a ton of yellow arrows along the way. This is a fancy one. Joyce will show you more pictures of some of the painted yellow arrows. This is a very nice way marker that we saw, especially closer that we got to Santiago. And that would tell us how many more kilometers we would have to go, and it would show us the way that we would have to go. So because of what Father Velina did, in 1985, the number of people who went to Santiago to get, they call it a Compostela, it's the certificate of completion, which right out there on the table, Joyce's Compostela is out there, you can see that. So the number of people that went to Santiago to get that Compostela was 1,245. That was in 1985. Last year, 2023, the year Joyce and I got our Compostelas, there were 443,000 people who had done it. So from about 1,250 people to 443,000 people. So it's a lot more popular now. All right, so this is me and Joyce. We're starting out. This is not exactly where we started because I think Spain only counts the kilometers you walked in Spain, and we walked a few in France too. So, but here we are starting out.
And that meant there were 790 kilometers
To
our destination.
To go, yep. There's not just one route of the Camino. There are all kinds of routes. In fact, sometimes they say that you step out your front door and that is the beginning of your Camino. Now that works a little better when you're in Europe. When you're in America, if you start your Camino when you step out your front door, you do have to somehow get across the ocean. But this is the, oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's see if I can use there we go. This is the route that we took, the Française, the French route. That is the most popular, and if you watch the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, that's the route that they take. And this is the 500 miles, and it's northern Spain up here. But there's also the Portuguese route, there's the Via de la Plata, there's the Primitivo, there's the northern way up here. So basically you can go from anywhere to Santiago, and that is your route. But these routes have the most infrastructure, the most places where you can stay in restaurants and things like that.
But technically, you can walk on this Camino from places like Prague. There's a route. You can walk from Rome to Santiago. You can walk from the Netherlands. I think you might have to take a boat. But people come from those places. There's routes.
So some of the infrastructure, just some of the details of where we stayed. This is an albergue. It's like a hostel. It's a dorm room, basically. And so you get a bunk bed, you get assigned a bunk bed, and they give you some paper sheets, and maybe if you're lucky you have a blanket, maybe a pillow, something like that. We chose not to stay in many of these. The albergues, you can have a room of maybe 8 beds all the way up to a room of 200 beds. So it just depends. And it could be the town that has the albergues. It could be a private, it could be the church that has the albergues. We did stay in a couple of them, and we'll show you that. But we chose to stay in little nicer rooms. This is the first place that we stayed. The first night we were in Orson, and this is the shared bathrooms. So there are 2 toilets. There's 2. This one right here is the shower, so you would go in there. They gave you a coin, and you would put it in the slot, and you got 5 minutes of water. So you'd have to be quick. And then the bathrooms. We also, at that time, had a pilgrim's meal that night. So there were about 50 of us or so in this room, and they served us a meal family style. And then at the end of the meal, everybody stood up and said who they were, where they were from, and why they were walking the Camino. And people from all countries all over the place were there. It was great. So just jump in if you have anything you want to say. Okay. Okay, this is the second albergue that we stayed at. We went with Laura. Laura was the one that had done it before, and she was teaching us, and she was, the first 20 days, she was making all the arrangements for where we were staying, and she was teaching us at the time, and she said, Gragnon, we have to stay at Gragnon. It's this wonderful place. You sleep on the floor. There are these mats where you sleep. You don't even get a bed, and she said it's just the most incredible place. And Joyce said, I said, yeah, let's do it. And I think Joyce was right. This is after I had injured my knee, so it was kind of hard sleeping on the floor with an injured knee. And Laura loved it. It's one of her favorite places on the Camino, and Joyce and I did not love it as much as she did. But it was part of the experience.
And that's
It was
actually
good.
the chapel. We were, sleeping under the saints there.
Now, there was a lot of the younger people had gotten there before we did, and they were up in a room up above, and they were jammed in like sardines, and it was hot up there, and so we were glad the older folks were downstairs in the in the cooler chapel.
Yeah.
So what Joyce and I did is we stayed more in private rooms, and so this room had 3 beds because Laura was with us at the time, so we were able to stay together. But most of the places that we stayed at, and some of them were really nice, had 2 beds. These old places, these old buildings had been, some of them maybe 1,000 years, some of them 500 years old, a couple hundred years old. They were gorgeous. So these are some of our favorite places that we stayed.
And what I'd like to add is that Suzanne's showing you photos of just a few places we stayed. We stayed in 40 different locations.
Yeah, basically every night, except for our rest days, every night we were going to a different place. So figuring out how to work the shower in every new place and all that, it was great. One thing that we did have that pilgrims, I'm sure in the Middle Ages did not have, is we had apps on our phone that would help us. Now, Joyce says that Laura told her not to look at the map, that we were supposed to just walk following the arrows, the yellow arrows. But I looked at the map. It had a map on it, so it would show you exactly where you were at, so you wouldn't get lost. And there was one time that I had started out before Joyce did that morning, and there was an alternate route, and we were going to take the regular route, and somehow I had gotten on the alternate route, so I am glad that I was checking the phone, because then I had to backtrack and go, and then I met her. But this also had all kinds of places to stay, so we would figure out where we were going to stay the next night, and we would look and see what the different hostels were, or the casa rurals, or the hotels, or the various places. We would choose a couple of places that looked good. A lot of times Joyce would be the one that would call, or we just sent messages over the phone to see if we can get a reservation. Some people go and they just show up in the town and they start looking for a place and they go, we didn't want to do it that way. We wanted to have the reservation. So that's how we did it most of the time. Food? Yes.
What did you do about laundry? You showered.
We did laundry. I have wool, merino wool. If you don't know merino wool, I love merino wool. It doesn't stink. You don't have to wash it all that much. So my shirts were all merino wool. So I would do laundry every couple of days, every 3 days. Some of the places had washing machines, and so we would do a load there. Most of it was just hand washing. So it was underwear, socks, shirts sometimes. What about you and laundry?
Yeah, I think I only did laundry probably once a week. You just don't do it.
And your pants, they just get dirty. It's okay. Everybody else is dirty and smelly, and so it doesn't matter so much. And I took a couple of pairs of pants, maybe 3 pairs of, underwear, socks, that kind of thing. So we didn't have as much. We just wore the same thing every day. Food, well, I have to start with coffee because coffee is life. Café con leche, it's like a latte. Every place, whether it was a small little bar or a cafe or whatever, had these wonderful, huge espresso machines. And so you could get a café con leche, which is like a small, and it's just a small little cup. It's not like the huge ones that we get. But you can, anywhere that you would stop, you could get a café con leche. So I had probably 4 or 5 a day or more. I liked them. So that was one I had. I had a lot, I'm gluten-free. And so the thing that I had for breakfast the most, they call it a tortilla, but it's not like a Mexican tortilla. It is an egg and potato casserole. So you kind of make it in a pie plate. So if you order it, you get a slice of this tortilla, just like you would get a slice of pie or something like that. So that's what I had most of the time for breakfast. I had on the way we'd stop anyway.
I had that a lot, but then I switched to chocolate croissants.
Yeah, she got all the pastries. Pastries. That's what we say. Yeah, okay, that's your favorite meal.
This is, oh, yes. A couple pounds, maybe like 2.
The food is so great, and you're drinking wine. Wine is cheap, and it comes with the meal, and you're eating food, and people think you're gonna lose weight, and no. But then I was taking a taxi half the time too, so.
This was honestly my #1 favorite meal on the Camino. I had this one day when it was very cold and very rainy outside. And you come in the entryway, you gotta get off your rain gear off, and it's all dripping all over, and you just feel gross. And then I went in to order, and I had the best bowl of lentil soup, just spiced perfectly, and crusty bread, and of course cafe con leche, and it was dreamy. That was my favorite meal.
And one of mine, this was at one of the places we showed you, that attic place. It was a young couple who had just gotten it, and they were really good. And we had a big lunch, and so we decided we didn't want to have a big dinner. And so they served soup and things like that, but they were closing like at 3. So I asked him if I could get just a bowl of soup for later in the evening, and he said he had to run to another town, but he would come back and he would bring me a bowl of soup out on their terrace, and Joyce you got something else.
Yeah, and it wasn't good, and this was my most jealous meal on the Camino, because that stuff
what was
to
it?
die.
Pea and mint and.
It was mint, yeah, pea and mint.
And there was something else I can't. It was good. It was good. Padron peppers. These are really good. They just kind of cook them in, and they're not hot, but they're good. So that's one of the specialties of the area. Okay, arrows. You want to?
Okay, yeah. So I did use the app a little, but most of the time I was just on the lookout for arrows. And so you can see they were kind of scrubby. I mean, it's just somebody took a brush, or in many cases spray painted, always yellow, arrows on the sides of buildings. Go ahead. Occasionally, people made impromptu arrows on the ground. The one I wish I would have taken a picture of was in one area, somebody made one of these arrows on the ground out of road apples, if you know what those are. Go ahead. Now, as we said, some of the signs were really nice and official, but look at these two. They point 2 opposite directions, and the one on the right was pointing me to go right onto the railroad tracks. So as a retired railroader, I knew that was messed up and I shouldn't do that, and I went that way. There are 2 yellow arrows in this picture, and this helps you see how obscure they were to find sometimes. There's one down on the curb.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
One
and then there's
here.
one, there might
that
even
one.
be 2 on that door
kind of
frame.
looked like one, but that one.
But sometimes you just had to stand at a corner, and I would just stand there and wait until I found an arrow, because it really was a pretty bad idea to go the wrong way, because you'd be off and.
Because you didn't want to backtrack. You were walking 500 miles. You didn't want to have to walk 501.
Yeah, it's true. We thought about discovery when we were on the Camino. Yes, Steve, were you? Oh.
I was just going to ask you, do most people travel in groups or just individually?
I think more than half travel individually or as 2s. And when people were in bigger groups, it was generally because they met on the Camino.
Yeah, more smaller groups, I think. Now, when you get to, we started in France, and when you get to the last 100 kilometers, you have to, in order to get a Compostela, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers into Santiago. So a lot of people start right there at a town called Sarria, because it's 114 miles. And so those first couple days from Sarria, it was it was busy, there were tons of people because a lot of people started there. So there were, there were like school groups too and things like that. So maybe 30 in a group. So at those couple days, there were a lot of people walking together. But before that, it was smaller groups or individuals.
So here, when I say we were thinking about discovery, this one post on the left, you see somebody had spray painted an arrow and wrote kindness on it. And then this door on the right is to the room that we were assigned one night. We were assigned to the kindness room. I also really wanted, yes, Larry?
What about the weather? Talk a little bit about the weather. Did it change from France to the end of Spain, or did you have a lot of rain, or
Well, there was a little bit, the first day that we went, it was kind of dreary. It was kind of, so we had our rain ponchos on part of the way. There was one time that Joyce got caught. I was already at at the place that we were staying because I took a taxi, but she got caught in a rainstorm. You want to talk about that?
I will.
Okay, later.
I think I will.
And then the Meseta it's flat and there are little trees, and so it was hot, 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 hot. But then we got back in the hills of Galicia again, and it was cooler and there was more cover. So we'll talk about the Meseta coming up, and you'll talk about your rainstorm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we were pretty lucky.
Yeah.
We didn't have any terribly snowy days in the Pyrenees Mountains at the beginning, and we only had maybe 2 or 3 days of real rain. And so most of the time, we'd start in the morning, it'd be like 55 degrees, and by the afternoon it'd be 70, or on the bad days, 80.
And 80 in the Meseta is like 110. It felt like 110. So
Yeah, it was hot.
Talk about. But we were going in June and July. I think after we left, there was like a heat wave, and so it was
there
really,
was.
really hot after that. But we had pretty good weather.
Yes.
Summer then in their area too?
What, was it summer there? Yeah,
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
climate.
And they're closer to the
Seasons.
equator than we are, so hotter.
So like your water, were you carrying water or were there, places that you fill up?
Yes, our backpacks we had water, we were carrying water, although I found that most of the time, we would walk for a couple miles, and then there would be a cafe or a bar, and so we'd stop and get something to drink. So then we'd walk for a couple miles again, and then we'd just stop at a cafe or bar. So most of the time because we did the Française route, which has so much infrastructure in it, there are a lot of, and some of the other routes, it's a long ways in between cafes or bars, and so you have to be a lot more careful about making sure you brought enough water. But I had 2 bottles of water, and
Water was the biggest part of my pack. Yeah, because we kind of cheated and sent our luggage forward, so we only had a small amount.
That's not cheating.
Okay, it's not cheating. It's really not. But we had a minimal amount of stuff in our pack, rain poncho and some medical supplies, and water was the biggest thing that we were carrying. But there were also a lot of fountains, some of them medieval, some of them really, really old, and some modern fountains too. So there was a good supply of water along the way.
And they would say if it was potable, if you were able to drink it.
Yes.
If you shouldn't drink it, it says, you can't drink this,
In Spanish.
in Spanish. Something like that, yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask, is it always bottled water or tap water?
No, it was flowing water.
Yeah, tap water.
No,
No?
never got sick. So I wanted to show some of the trail conditions. So this was one of the worst days. These layers of rock, the white layers are raised, and the other layers in between had worn down. So in my case, I kind of put my feet in between these layers, because to try and walk on top of them, it was just very, you'd very much risk bad balance and falling. So Suzanne must have taken this picture, and
Yeah.
this was not nice to walk on.
No, it was one of the hardest days, although you did the really hard day, which is coming up.
Different trail conditions. So sometimes you see that little path on the left there, that little path in the grass. That's where I was walking. And here I was going into Pamplona, which is where they do the running of the bulls. And I believe they did the running of the bulls like 15 days after we were there. So we
Yeah,
just missed it.
Beginning of July.
But we did go through Pamplona. So
And this is the day that I injured my knee, so this was day 5. And I injured my knee,
before this.
yeah, like you had 6 miles to get into Pamplona, I think.
Yeah, so this was the first day I walked by
I
myself.
took a picture of this too, so
Oh, okay.
it might have been.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I just thought this was cool to see how European it looks. I mean, it is Europe, so.
And sometimes you're walking down a road in the middle of the town.
Right through the middle of a small town sometimes.
That's the Camino, that's the route. This was the,
This is the area called the Meseta, and I have a story to tell. It's the flat central section of the Camino, and it's probably about 100 miles long. And so this was at a period when I was walking by myself, and I was sitting alone in a cafe one morning, and lots of people around eating and having their cafe con leche. And there was one group over here, and they were probably 50s, and they were saying, oh, well, we started all the way back in France. Like, they thought they were really special, but so did we. But they said, but we took a train across the Meseta. It just wasn't worthwhile. Now, Suzanne and I thought the Meseta reminded us of Nebraska and Iowa.
yeah,
You know,
it was
it's
beautiful.
very
It was
agricultural.
hot. That was the worst part about it. It was hot, but it was beautiful.
So
We liked it.
so in my story, these people on my left, I can visualize it well. People over here said, oh yeah, we took a train across the Meseta. That's kind of implying that's a waste of time. And there's this young 20-something group over here. And the young man who grew up in Denver and was living in California, so he's a California boy now, and he said, yeah, the Meseta is kind of like the Nebraska of the Camino. And I had not been a part of this conversation. I was just silent, and I said, I'd just like to point out that I'm from Nebraska. And he was immediately, just totally red and shocked. And he said, oh, I didn't think there'd be anybody from Nebraska here. Like, it's okay to slam Nebraska if there's nobody there to hear it. But I think that, after I said that, there was a moment of silence, and then the whole cafe just rolled on the floor because it was so hilarious. And his friends, I think, were thrilled to see him put his foot in his mouth. And I believe that they told that story many times later on the Camino.
As are we.
Yeah, as am I.
Okay, this was probably, was this the hardest?
Yeah, this was my worst day. On walking down this, because I had just turned around to take a picture of where I had just come from, and it was plant your 2 sticks, take a step. Plant your 2 sticks, take a step. It was very slow because, I got a little osteoporosis and I was not about to fall and break a limb and finish the Camino right there. So, yeah. And this was also the day that a young man with a baby in a backpack passed me.
No.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this big one down here is like 6 inches off the ground. So, you had to decide, do I put my feet down there in the dirt in between? Do I try to step on top? Every step was a decision. It's kind of tradition, It's what the Camino is.
And that's 500 miles, so it'd be a lot of clearing paths for.
But some places were more, like there was, I remember there was one really bad hill where they put like a brick path down the hill. So they have done what you're saying some places.
That looks like some of the path that we took up the mountain in Colorado. So did that guy from Colorado just jog through there?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't go on this because I was starting to get better, but we were getting closer and closer to Santiago, and I didn't want to injure myself again because I wanted to walk into Santiago, so. This was my worst. Now, a lot of the places that I went into, I was taking a taxi into. This one place, I actually walked the whole day. I don't know, it was 20 kilometers, 12 miles, something like that. This is into Molina Seca. Was that it? And what they had done is the town used to be down below, but they wanted, I don't know, to have this, a dam or something. So they moved the town up the hill, and then they built this whole bridge across here. This bridge is tall. I am afraid of heights. Now, when I was looking at it, it doesn't look, but then it's 2 lanes of traffic, and then 2 paths on the side, and the handrail was only about this tall. It wasn't that tall. And so what I should have done is just walk down the center of the road because there weren't that many cars going. But what I did is I hung on to the thing, and I didn't look, and I just went like that. We had to stop and let other people go by because I was going so slow, and it's like, I hate this, I hate this. That was the only way to get into town. You had to go over the bridge to get into town. So this was my least favorite. I should have taken a taxi.
Yes.
There is a town in Nebraska that has moved
Oh,
from the bottom
is there?
Really?
to the top of the hill, Niobrara.
Ah,
There's a big bridge, but you don't
Really?
have to use it.
you don't have to use it. Well, I'm not crossing it.
I just get a kick out of this picture because this is me as a struggling pilgrim.
And you look like your mom?
And I look like my mom. And it was raining that day, so that's my rain poncho. And
Yeah.
that was one of our drearier days. Yeah.
And this is just a shot, going over the Pyrenees at the beginning, just looking down at the places down below, and we're kind of up high enough, we're in the clouds. And want to say anything about that? And then the sheep on the way, and it was that steep. We were going up that steep. And some more scenery. Scenery was gorgeous, and different scenery all over the place. This is one of my favorite, because sometimes you would walk along, and sometimes the towns were up on hills, so you could see it from a far way away. Sometimes they were down in a valley, and so sometimes you're walking along, and then the town just appears because you come upon it. So this is one of my favorite pictures.
This is one of the 2 or 3 most famous spots on the Camino, and it's called Alto del Perdón, which literally would mean Mount of Forgiveness. And it's at an elevation of about 2,600 feet. And this was also just right after Suzanne got injured. So this was
It's right outside of Pamplona.
this was one of my first days walking by myself. And so it was a 12-mile day, which wasn't really a long day for us, but it was kind of lonely walking by myself, because I hadn't expected it. But I felt a huge sense of accomplishment that I navigated to this spot by my little self. And if you watch The Way, that movie, this is prominently featured there.
Yep.
I wanted to talk a little bit about crops that we saw growing. Of course, there were sunflowers, whole huge fields of sunflowers, but also wheat, a little corn, and lots of alfalfa. And on the next slide here, lots of grapes, lots and lots of grapes.
Especially in the central area, it was very much lots of vineyards and a lot of a wine area. And that's why wine was nice and cheap in Spain and really good. Yeah, I like cafe con leche better, but wine was good too. Okay, this is one of my stories. This is one of the first times I was on my own, and I had been taking a taxi, and so I kind of got used to taking the taxi. Laura wanted me to take a bus the next time, but a bus was a lot. And I said what scared me the most was the logistics, trying to figure out the logistics. And so she wanted me to take a bus, and I didn't want to take the bus. She walked down to where the bus, like a block or two away from our hotel, and she found out where the bus stop was, but I didn't even do it because I wasn't going to take a bus. The day before, I had taken a taxi, and the taxi driver had given me his card, and he had said, if you need a taxi driver tomorrow, call me. I can do it. And so I figured, okay, that's what I was going to do. So I sent Joyce and Laura off in the morning, and I went down and I had another cafe con leche because I didn't want to get to the next place too soon. It was about 10:30 in the morning, and I called the number on the card, and he said, oh, I'm busy today. And I'm like, what do I do now? Joyce and Laura had left. I don't know where the bus is. I had heard that the bus was leaving like at 2:30 in the afternoon, and so I went in and I tried to talk to the owner of the restaurant that we were at, and sometimes they're able to get a taxi driver and all that kind of stuff. But this guy didn't do it. He just handed me a number and said, yeah, the bus is supposed to come at 2:30. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? I wanted to sit down and cry. And so I decided, okay, I'll walk down to the bus stop and see if I can find it or something. So I go and I see, and trying to figure out the schedules and when the bus was supposed, it was very complicated and it was all in Spanish. And so I was looking at it and trying to figure it out. And one of these women came over and said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I need to take the bus to the next town. And she said, oh, my friends and I are going to take that bus, and it's supposed to be here in a half hour. You want to come wait with us? And I was like, yes, please, yes. And so I waited they're from South Korea, just a group of coworkers who had come to do a portion of the Camino. And so we waited and talked a little bit, and then we got on the bus, and they showed me what to do and got to the next town. And so they are my angels, yes, the angels. And in the Camino, there are always people who are doing things like that, who are helping you and that. We just help one another. So these are my South Korean friends, my angels. All right, you want me to start there? This is one of our favorite places to stay. This is right after Laura had left. It was after the 20 days that she was with us, so it was just Joyce and me. And this place, what we had read in one of the reviews was this was owned by the brother of the woman who had married Emilio Estevez's son. Okay, so it's somehow tied to Emilio Estevez and Martin Sheen. And so, okay, let's stay here. So we stayed here, and we did find out that's true. It was her brother, and there was a story that Martin Sheen and his grandson were going on the Camino. They weren't walking it, they were just going through it a while ago, and they came into this town, and his grandson looked at this woman, and they fell in love. And so now they actually, both of them live in Los Angeles. So it was really cool to stay there. This town is called Hornios. And it is one of our favorite places that we stayed because
of a special experience that we had at this particular church. It was, of course, a Catholic church. We didn't see anything but Catholic churches in Spain. This particular church is called Iglesia Church of San Roman, and it was built in the 1600s, and that was very representative. We just saw church and church and church that were that kind of vintage.
And this was a small town. This is a small town church.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
So this was my most memorable day on the Camino. We went to 3 or 4 of these pilgrim masses, and we had just attended mass run by this priest, Padre Manuel, and but the backstory is that this was a hard day. It was day 20, and I had walked the second half of the day alone, and this was the day that it poured on me, and then it hailed on me. And so, being out there alone, I was like, oh, like 3 or 4 miles yet to the town where I needed to go, and being rained and hailed on. It just, was not fun. And it was a 14.5-mile day, so it was a little bit longer. So that evening we went to this mass, and I think I was kind of emotionally burned out by then. But it was a very touching mass because he spoke a little more slowly. And although it was in Spanish, because he spoke a little more slowly, I could understand most of what he said. So afterwards we went up to him, and I spoke to him in Spanish and told him that it had been really, really meaningful for me. And he gave me a big hug, and I cried, and Suzanne took the picture.
The other thing he had done is that he asked where all the pilgrims were from, and he had us sing a song in our own language. So we sang one in English, there was one in French, there was somebody there from Germany, but she didn't want to sing a song, so he sang a song in German. And then there was one woman from South Korea, and he asked her to sing a song, and I'm like, don't make her sing alone, don't do that, don't push her in. But she did, she sang the song. It was beautiful and wonderful, and she will pop up later in our story.
And I wanted to mention that in his hands is a stamp. At UP we'd call it a whacker. And when you look at our pilgrims' passports and you see all these stamps, he was stamping our passports because that's what you do. Whenever you go to a church, you get somebody there to stamp it.
Because when you go to Santiago, you need to show the pilgrim's passport that you've been to all these places, so that then you get the Compostela. So every place you go, you're supposed to get the hostel, the albergue, the bars, the cafes, the churches. You're supposed to get at least one a day or two a day. And then we went to dinner, and there was an opera singer. It was live music at this restaurant, and he was singing opera. There was another guy who was singing like Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And then they were singing together. One would take the soprano part, and one would take the tenor or the bass part. Who would have thought we would hear live opera in a small town?
A very
in Spain?
small town.
All right, and this is Cruz de Ferro. This is the Iron Cross. This is one of the most known places. So you bring a rock from home, and so I brought a rock from representing all the burdens and all the prayers of my parishioners of my church, and so I laid it at the cross of that. And I loved being there because I missed the last kind of important, the Alto de Perdón. I wasn't able to be there, so I got to be at this place. So I was really pleased that I was able to walk there. And then that's the rock that I left.
And this is, yes, Steve? First of all, we made sure that we always had, maybe 100 or 200 in cash on us. And there were, and so, what am I doing? So when we were in a bigger town, we'd make sure and go to an ATM and stock up on cash. But then most of the hostels or small kind of B&Bs without the breakfast would take credit cards. So this is just a lovely photo of some of the women that we met on the Camino. The two in the back left are from New Zealand, and then Suzanne, and then there's our friend who sang in the church, the story Suzanne just told you. That's Yun Kyung from South Korea, and then the lady to my right is from Ireland, and I believe, did we say she is 78?
Something like that.
I think so, yeah.
And she was walking with her sister, her younger sister.
Yeah.
There were like 14 in the family, and she was number 2, and her younger sister was like number 12, something like that. But then her younger sister went home, and she kept walking.
But we also met people from Transylvania in Yugoslavia. We walked quite a bit with a woman from there. And we met people from France, Mexico, Spain, the Netherlands, Australia, and I'm sure other countries I forgot.
That was my injury. That was the day in Pamplona. We were going to take a rest day anyway, so that next day, Laura took me to the hospital, and I got x-rays and saw a doctor and all that kind of stuff. Okay, have to say that. These things, I got these walking sticks. They're just regular walking sticks, but I heard about them before I went, so I ordered them. They were created by a physical therapist in England. And so there's a place to put your hand, and so it was great. And so I ordered them like a year before I went, and they saved me because I was able to use them as crutches. So they really helped me to get around. So I'm glad. They're just regular walking sticks, but I'm glad I had them.
But the handles are ergonomic.
Yep.
So that Suzanne's photo was earlier in the Camino. This one is, 3 days from the end.
So we exchanged injuries at first. The first couple of days, you were having some problems.
Yeah, because I went to Spain with shin splints. So
And
then I got better.
And my knee, and then by the time I was getting better, then your foot started bothering.
Then I think I got plantar fasciitis, but that taping job, again, which I got from the internet, like I said, sat there with my phone, reading the steps, and it felt like I had a cast on because it was so intensely taped, but it worked. It worked. That's it. Oh, and actually, I wanted to say, after taping, I walked 15.8 miles that day over 7 hours at about 2 miles per hour, and I arrived at 5:50 in the evening, which was one of my very latest days.
Yeah.
So it was a slog, but I did it.
No. And she got there, and the guy who was the owner wanted her passport and wanted her this, and I said, no, she needs to go take a shower. Just let her she'll bring the passport later. So I
Yeah.
stuck up for you.
Thank you. So this is the goal, if you will. I mean, really the goal of the Camino is walking the Camino, But this is the place that you go at the end. It's a cathedral, not just a church, of Santiago de Compostela. And they began building it in the year 1075 and completed it in 1211. So it's a little old, but it's had some further additions over the years, and at this point its capacity is 1,200 people, so it's big. And there are two things that you do when you get to the cathedral at the end. You go and you stand in line so that you can go to the golden seated statue of St. James and give him a hug. That's just what you do. And then the other thing is you go to the Pilgrim's Mass to see the big incense burner, which is called a botafumeiro.
So I was kind of sad. Another reason I was sad was it felt like Joyce got to interact and talk with a whole lot more people than I did, and it kind of felt like over this whole time, and it kind of felt like I didn't get to talk to as many people, and maybe she was cool and I wasn't cool. And I realized part of it is because I was taking a taxi a lot of times, so I wasn't out there being able to talk. And when I was walking with other people, and so there were reasons why. But on our last day in Santiago, we spent about 3 days in Santiago after we got there. And our last day, we wanted to go to the Pilgrim's Mass. We left a little early because we had brunch, and brunch was really good. So we got there at 11:35, and by this time a lot of the seats had been taken already. And so we split up and we went to sit where we could, and I found the seat next to these two people. They were it was Michael and Susan, and they were part of a group who was from the east coast of the United States, and they were traveling around Spain with their two priests looking at some of these different things, and their two priests were actually going to be taking part in the Pilgrim's Mass. And so he and I were talking. I was sharing it with showed him my Pilgrim's passport and talking about being a pilgrim and all that kind of stuff. And he said, you should go take pictures. You should. So I went in and took pictures before it started. And then, and he also said, because if you're not Catholic, you cannot receive communion. you need to be Catholic in order to receive communion. But he said, if you want to go up there, you can get a blessing from the priest. And he said, my priest is going to be serving right here, so I can go right in front of you, and I can tell him that you want a blessing. And I said, yes, yes. And so we had this wonderful connection. And Joyce didn't talk to anybody she sat next to. So it was like I got to have this conversation with some people. And so I thought that was really cool. And then you never know if the Botafumeiro is going to be swung at a particular mass. So we didn't know if it was going to, but it was. This is what it looks like.
And so it's an incense burner, and it when they swing it, and in a minute here we're going to have Suzanne's video of swinging it, it goes 35 miles an hour. It weighs 175 pounds. It's a little over 5 feet tall. And I just want to say there was a famous accident in 1499 when Catherine of Aragon was on her way to marry the future King Henry VIII. The Botafumeiro was swinging, the rope broke, and it flew out the window. One of those back windows right there. But no one was killed. And I also read this morning, just this morning, that the most recent incident was 1937, so it's really pretty safe now.
Yeah. No.
But check out,
Almost
her
$100.
video is just awesome.
Okay, and the way the church is set up, it's like a cross. And so there is, like the altar and all that kind of stuff. And then there's all these rows here. And then there's rows of people here and rows of people over here. And we were sitting over here on this side of the cross. And Michael, my friend, said when it was going to start swinging, I wasn't going to do it because I didn't want to offend. I didn't want to.
Well, there were signs everywhere that said no photography.
Photos. Yeah.
No
but
photos.
Everybody else was getting out their camera. And he said, you might want to take a picture of this. And so I said, okay, if he tells me I can do it, I'm going to do it. So I got out and I got this wonderful 4-minute video of this thing swinging. And since I was standing right here and it was swinging this way, it was the perfect place to be sitting. So we're not going to show the whole 4 minutes. We'll do about 10 seconds, but this is, okay, we'll see if, do I do it again?
It takes 6 men.
Yeah, to swing it, you can, yep. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do.
That's okay, we'll see it again.
I wanted to do this. Okay, the guys who were swinging it, the priests who were swinging it over here. And so, going back and forth here. Now they say the reason they do that is because the pilgrims smell so much and but no, it's a Catholic tradition.
But it went right over our heads,
Yeah.
35 miles an hour. Isn't
Yeah.
that something?
All right. So we got there. Well, this is 3 days before the Pilgrim's Mass. This is the day that we got into town and got our pictures taken in front of the cathedral, and we did it. We did it.
That's it. Now, I think we've answered a lot of questions,
Yeah.
but maybe, I don't know.
Any other questions? Yep.
What kind of training did you do?
Not enough for me.
I think we tried, that last month beforehand, maybe tried to walk 3 miles twice a week and had no idea what it was. But we did take in October of the year before, I think. We walked on the Wabash Trace, so we walked 12 miles and 10 miles and 9 miles.
3 days.
3
in a row.
days. So that told us that we thought we could make it that far, but it's a whole different animal doing it 41 days.
Now, I was walking at least a mile a day, and I wanted a couple of days in the week that I was walking longer, and we did like a 7 mile, well, you didn't because you had shin splints, but I did like a 7 mile walk a couple of weeks before. Not enough training, I should have done a lot more training, but some people hear about the Camino and pick up and they just go and they do it, so.
I think you guys did tremendously. I think it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, it was an incredible experience.
Yes. Oh, no, I thought you were raising your hand.
I think she was just clapping.
Oh, good. Yeah,
The shin splints was because you were training.
I think it was, yeah. Yeah,
And you changed shoes.
I changed shoes,
And
yeah.
the shoes work better, the second pair you got?
Yeah. I started with the shoes that are no rise, that have little to no, they have no heel. Your foot is, your toes are almost a little higher. And I walked in those for months, but then right before the Camino, they gave me trouble, and so I went to the other normal way.
And my shoes, they started out white, and they're kind of a little dirty, but they have a few more miles left in them. They do, they do. And you can see around on the Camino, a lot of old hiking boots, they make them into planters, and they have flowers coming out of them, and that. A lot of hiking boots. Yeah.
Yes, Russ?
Did you always feel safe, and would you do it again?
I always felt safe. I don't think there was any time that I really didn't feel safe, and I would go in a heartbeat. Although, I would like to walk around Prince Edward Island, so that might be my next Camino. I'd like to do the Portuguese route, so that might be my next Camino. But I love these long distance hikes. I want to do more of those.
There was only one day I felt uneasy, and that was on a Sunday when everything was closed, and I was walking through a very big city in an industrial area. So that was kind of creepy because there was nobody around me, and it just felt like there could be somebody, around the next corner. But I did a lot of walking. I mean, there were times when I walked out in the country for a couple hours and didn't see anybody. And that didn't bother me. That felt, and I do think that in Spain they really watch out for pilgrims for the most part. And would I do it again? I would do a small portion again. Okay, let's wrap it up, and if anybody else has any other questions, we can still take them. Mm-hmm. Yes?
So is there a route then if you just want to do a small portion, you don't go so far and then you do alternative go a different direction?
You know what people typically do in that when they want to do a shorter thing is they walk, they go on maybe the same route we did, but they walk for a week or two, fly home, come back next year to the spot they stopped at, and then keep going. Fly home, come back to that spot the next year. That's how people do it.
And a lot of people start at Sarria and go that last 100 kilometers. A lot of people do that. Mm-hmm. The Portuguese route is about 225 miles, so if you want to go a shorter one, that's a good route to go to. Or, like Joy said, you just walk pieces of that one.
And our friend, Pastor Laura Rasmussen, gave us spiritual direction while we walked on the Camino, and that is the kind of the part of her career that she's embarking on. So if you want to go on a Camino, we'd recommend Pastor Laura Rasmussen, mm-hmm. who was the interim pastor at Peace Church in West Omaha, and that's part of how we met her.
Yep, she does tours, so if you want to go, we recommend her.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you.